All right, let's answer a few questions on this Wednesday edition of PFT PM as I buy time. Scrolling through the document that has the first question from our good friend who's been posing questions for a very long time, long enough for me to figure out that the handle is not a Red Zone Out, it's a Red Zona UK. Is Mike Tomlin the perfect doorman for Aaron Rodgers to exit the NFL with a respectable 9-8 record? This is where the objectives of Tomlin and Rodgers deviate. For Rodgers, winning record and getting to the playoffs is good enough to wipe away the stink from 2023, 2024 with the New York Jets. I think that's a good way for him to walk off into the sunset. Just get to the playoffs. For the Steelers, for Mike Tomlin, I think this whole thing is a failure unless they win a playoff game. Anything after that is gravy. They need to win a playoff game because if they don't, well, all this stuff you did in the offseason, paying DK Metcalf all that money, waiting for weeks for Aaron Rodgers to come around, even though, by all appearances, they had a deal in place. They knew what they were going to do. The fans were left in the dark. The fans were left to think that the Steelers were engaging in conduct unbecoming the black and gold, unbecoming and unfit for the terrible towel, to be waiting and waiting and waiting for a guy the Jets cut. They win a playoff game, it's a victory. It's a positive. They fail to win a playoff game, you're going to have a lot of fans saying, so what? And look, those fans that are skeptical about Aaron Rodgers, once he starts throwing the ball around, week 1 at the Jets, week 2 against the Seahawks, week 3 at the Patriots, they go 3-0. Fans will be feeling very differently about Aaron Rodgers, and it puts a ton of pressure on that first game. Oh, so much. What a game to start the season with. Can't wait. 1 o'clock Eastern, the first Sunday of the regular season. Steelers at the Jets. New look Jets, new attitude Jets, new culture Jets. Aaron Rodgers trying to prove that the Steelers were right and prove that the Jets were wrong. So much drama. As the NFL said after the schedule came out, Mike North, the guy who puts it all together now. If they had known Aaron Rodgers was going to Pittsburgh, that would not have been a 1 o'clock game. That is a juicy game with which to start the season. Next up, Dr. J, 144. I know these things are tough to predict, but do you have a gut feeling about where things are headed with these Antonio Brown charges? More likely he faces serious time or the charges are dropped. I don't know anything about the facts. I just know what's in the warrant, as reported by initially, I believe, the Washington Post, and then others obtained the warrant. There's a pending warrant for the arrest of Antonio Brown for attempted murder with a firearm, serious felony in Florida, serious felony anywhere. You can tell that Antonio Brown's position is going to be akin to stand your ground, self-defense. I was attacked. I was robbed. How am I the guy that's in trouble for this? But the thing to remember, if this went down the way the warrant said, at some point, the victim does morph into the aggressor. At some point, the threat is neutralized. After the threat's neutralized, you don't have license to chase down one of the people who attacked you and shoot at them simply because they had been attacking you earlier. That's going to be the factual challenge here. Can the state prove that's what happened? And can Brown prove self-defense, stand your ground, whatever it would be that would allow him to convince a judge and or a jury that he was justified if he did indeed take shots at one of the individuals allegedly trying to rob him. And who knows where this goes? He's still free. They haven't put his poster up at the post office with the most wanted. I know that's FBI, but I don't get the sense there's this overwhelming desire to bring him in and have him face justice. He's posting on social media some very erratic things, blaming the media for the situation, blaming the Miami Police Department for changing their mind about this. But, you know, once they did their investigation, talked to the guy who was allegedly shot at, allegedly and possibly grazed in the neck by one of the bullets that were allegedly fired by Antonio Brown, they decided to proceed. But for now, Brown's free, and we'll see how it all plays out. And part of it as well, what kind of a client will Antonio Brown be? What kind of a witness will he be if he testifies? Usually criminal defendants don't get on the witness stand, but if he's going to tell a story of self-defense, he may be the best source of the evidence for that? And can he be controlled on a witness stand? Look, I don't know what his issues are objectively. For several years, you can make, I think, a not unfair conclusion that something's off. Something's off with Antonio Brown. And if he was like that early in his career, he did a good job of concealing it. It seems to have happened in the last 5 or 6 years. And whatever it is, it could complicate his effort to defend himself against these charges. Another question. TYZ, I-94, any update on which state the Chiefs will be picking for the next stadium? When is their deadline? Well, Kansas has applied a June 30 deadline for the Chiefs to take the package that Kansas has on the table for a new stadium, dome stadium for the Chiefs, possibly a Super Bowl in the future for Kansas City if they would go that route. Last week, Missouri finalized legislation that will pay for half of the renovations of Arrowhead, $1.15 billion. The state will pay for half of that. Now, it's going to be cheaper for the Chiefs to renovate Arrowhead because they're going to be kicking in roughly half of whatever this is going to be versus the new stadium, but you may make more money off the new stadium. All of these open air teams want dome stadiums now because they want to have events year round. And they want to attract a Super Bowl, and they want to have concerts and Final Fours. And there's only so many big events to go around. Like, if somebody's doing a stadium tour in the fall and winter, how many of these dome stadiums are even going to make it onto the final list? I don't know. But these are all factors, business factors, that drive where these decisions go. And for the Chiefs, it's very simple. They got to make a decision between Missouri and Kansas. And it's Missouri's fault because the voters rejected that sales tax continuation in April of 2024. Now the voters have the prerogative to do it. What should have happened was they should have come up with a way to get the politicians to make the money available without taking it to the voters, because we've learned time and again, if you take it to the voters are going to say no. No public money for these multi-billion-dollar businesses that can pay for their own stadiums. So it's now gotten to the point where the Chiefs have very real options. Kansas or Missouri, they're going to have to make a decision, presumably by the end of the month, but we'll see how firm that deadline is. If and when June 30 comes and goes, and if and when Kansas says, okay, fine, we're out, we're done, no Kansas option for the Kansas City Chiefs. Next, another one from our good friend A-Red Zona UK, is Mike McDaniel on a hot seat for 2025. I believe the Dolphins coach is definitely on the hot seat. I don't know how you could argue he's not. Every year they say they're going to change the culture. At some point, you got to change the person in charge of the culture. And the challenge for the Dolphins this year, McDaniel's had that nice guy vibe all these years, 3 years so far as coach of the team. How do you abruptly change that? How do you become a hard ass after 3 years of being a nice guy? And this is part of the reality, that pendulum that swings for teams. We had a Belichick-style hard ass in Brian Flores, and he was fired. We go to the other end of the spectrum. Nice guy, player-friendly, Mike McDaniel. Guy's late, guy's not listening, team not winning, team not tough enough. They move on from McDaniel, it's going to go in the other direction. Inevitably, it'll go in the other direction. And I think Tua Tagovailoa's future in Miami is hinging on Mike McDaniel's future in Miami. They're committed to Tua for 2 more seasons. They get through this season, they get a new coach. New coach is going to want a new quarterback. I guarantee you a new coach is going to want a new quarterback, because if they will have had a season bad enough to get McDaniel fired, the quarterback is too close to the failure, the chronic inability to get to the playoffs and win games that caused the coach to be fired. Tua will be out, traded, cut, whatever. New coach will want to move on, presumably, from Tua if McDaniel is out. So there's a lot of pressure on Tua. There's a lot of pressure on McDaniel. And I don't know how much better the Dolphins are really going to be. They can talk all they want about changing the culture. They're going to have to prove it 1 week at a time, starting in September. Dr. J144 with another question. Let's take a couple more here. I heard Peter King say before that Hall of Fame voters should basically ignore off-the-field stuff. I think human nature is inevitable, though. It will be hard for Justin Tucker and Antonio Brown, if found guilty, to ever make it right. Well, the bylaws prevent consideration of non-football issues. And the argument is if we change the bylaws, it'll be unfair because plenty of guys have gotten in the past based upon off-field issues, most notably the guy whose slow speed Bronco chase happened 31 years ago yesterday, O.J. Simpson. I still think non-football factors trickle in to the voting. Terrell Owens, he was kept out for multiple years because enough of the voters didn't like him because he didn't kiss their asses. There have been players who have been kept out because the voters didn't like the personality. In fact, Ira Kaufman flipped that around and used that to get Warren Sapp in. He challenged the voters to not hold against Warren Sapp the fact that he can be a handful to deal with. And a lot of the voters probably had a story or two about an interaction with Warren Sapp that would have made them inclined to say, nah, he can wait a year or two, like Chris Carter had to do, like Terrell Owens had to do. It was a genius move by Ira to get Warren in. For the most part, just we don't like the guy is enough to keep him out. I think Antonio Brown's candidacy is going to be complicated. Who's going to stand up and make the case for Antonio Brown? Who's going to make a passionate case for Antonio Brown? First, someone has to do that, and then it has to work. We'll see if they can pull it off. And I guess Justin Tucker has potential Hall of Fame chops. It's hard to tell with kickers. But yeah, this incident that contributed to the Ravens releasing him, that's going to be a factor if and when the time comes for Tucker to be considered. Again, just a couple more. Ryan Nezet, assuming Roger Goodell is nearing retirement in the next 5 to 10 years, who are the potential candidates to succeed him as commissioner? He's 66. 3 years ago, he privately said there's no way he's going to be the commissioner when he's 80. I don't know. What else is he going to do? What other interests does he have? What other business could he get into? What from, I guess he'd go teach a class somewhere, something like that. But you've got a lot of money and you got a lot of power and relevance. And you're steering a ship that for the most part is in open blue water. Yeah, once every decade, there's a scandal, there's an issue, there's a challenge. But other than the Ray Rice thing from 2014, which I think there was probably a week and a half that Roger Goodell went to bed wondering whether or not when he wakes up, he's going to have to step down. It was bad, but that's the only time. So the money is flowing in. They're getting closer and closer to his goal of $25 billion in revenue per year by 2027. I don't know. Again, you got years left to live. What are you going to do with your life if you walk away? And will the owners push him unless and until they believe they have a viable alternative? And that's see, when you see the reports that in his next contract, the owners want to have a greater commitment to a succession plan, he's got them because they don't have an alternative. And I think at some point, they're just going to have to rip off the Band-Aid. I know the late Jim Irsay suggested this, and I've heard this from at least one owner. The next time they're hiring a commissioner in the NFL, it might be a situation where they have to go out and hire a traditional CEO, and you'll have a CEO of, Pepsi, and then jumps to a different, like FedEx, and jumps to like completely different lines of business. But the skill set of being an effective chief executive officer of a major business, that's transferable. That's what they may need to do. And then you have a chief football officer who's basically like the commissioner used to be. Or you could have the commissioner and a CEO who's above the commissioner, but it could blow up the whole model the next time they are hiring a commissioner. It could be that the commissioner is the number 2 to a CEO of the National Football League, especially when we consider that their businesses are expanding beyond just football. So the fact that there aren't any no-brainer candidates, you'll hear names like Condoleezza Rice. I don't think that'll happen. Kevin Warren, his name has come up in the past. They're going to want somebody in their 40s who's going to be around for another 15 or 20 years. You don't want to replace someone in his 70s with someone in their 60s. I think one of the reasons Brian Rolapp left, he's in his early 50s now. He has an opportunity to be the CEO of the PGA Tour. If he waits and waits and waits for Goodell to leave, he may be too old to be the commissioner by the time the NFL is looking for another one. So this is Game of Thrones stuff, and the king has 19 years under his belt. I don't think he'll be doing it for 19 more. But if you told me the over-under was 5, I'd probably take the over. Very important question. Well, a non-important question. Not a football question. They're all important. Duncan has this question. Is there any possible benefit at all to a team in delaying paying their top players? And this is a continuing theme as it relates to Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson, Aiden Hutchinson. The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. I mentioned earlier that 4th year for a first-round contract, the bargain you get if you can kick the can through 4 years, that's one reason to wait. Because, yes, the market will go up, but I think if you do a full analysis, whatever extra you pay over what you would have paid the year earlier, it still doesn't erase the huge benefit of having a guy like Aiden Hutchinson at $5.5 million this year, like Micah Parsons at $3 million last year, like Jamar Chase at $4.5 million last year. That's a reason to wait until the player has 4 years in, a first-round pick. Otherwise, the player continues to carry the injury risk. That's the reality. You make the guy play the 4th season, he's the one that's going to carry the injury risk, the risk of a serious injury. And the other side of it is, remember when Justin Jefferson missed, 5 or 6 games in 2023 with a hamstring problem? If you have any injury whatsoever and you've yet to get your contract, why are you playing? Why would you go out there? That's one of the realities. And, I'm 98%. Well, everybody's 98% or 95% or 90%. Well, everybody else has their security. I don't. I'm not playing unless I'm 100%. That's the downside to saying we're going to continue to keep the injury risk on the player. But the big thing for a first-round pick, if you can get through that 4th season, you've saved a lot of money. And it's not obvious, but to the people counting the beans, it is obvious. All right, this is the last question from Vamos for Ramos, the most important of the day. Any Ferrari updates, brand new or vintage? There was one in Pittsburgh that caught my eye. It's about 20 years old, low miles. And I finally convinced my wife that either I won't go to hell if I buy a Ferrari or she no longer cares if I do. That's the other thing. Like after we go, the vows are till death do us part. My wife may want nothing to do with me in the hereafter. And if I'm not there, if I'm in the other place, then she doesn't have to worry about me hanging around. So that hurdle has been cleared. And when I showed her the used one that's for sale near Pittsburgh, she said, well, wouldn't you just want to buy a new one if you buy one? It's like, whoa. But see, I think that the Jedi mind trick she's using is she knows at the end of the day, I am too cheap to do it. And that's going to be the challenge. And that's where I have to make the next mental leap. Will I actually do it? And I think I'm too cheap to do it because I am very cheap in some respects. You want to have a nice house to live in. You want to have a reasonably nice car to drive around. But there's a point where it's just too much. And the upkeep is going to be too much. So right now, that's what I'm wrestling with. So we've gotten past hurdle number 1. Will you go to hell? Hurdle number 2, wife has given me the authorization. Hurdle number 3, am I too cheap to do it? So stay tuned. Stay tuned. There will or there won't be a brand new Ferrari when July 28 rolls around and PFT Live returns. Until then, PFT PM as many weekdays as we possibly can right here, most of the time, answering your questions, keeping up to date. There's always something happening in the NFL, even when it's slow. We thank you for some of your time. Have a great day. We'll do this again on Thursday. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.